Abangers ang lahat sa ating bagong everyday primetime here on CJBS. Abangan ang ating mga bagong Psych Genius sa The Psych The Game Show Challenge 2 p.m. On the Couch 3 p.m. Ang ating regional and international news CJBS Weekend 6 p.m. At nagbabalik ang Psych Witness with Cara Joy Specials 8 p.m. Kaabang-abang ang ating everyday primetime dito lang sa CJBS TV. Welcome to our reality show, The Mind of Psych. This is her host, Cara. A very welcoming day to all of you. On behalf of the organizing committee, we are pleased to welcome all of you who are responsible for our reality show competition, The Mind of Psych. This is the least we can do within a short period of time in this time of pandemic to ensure that our future psychologists are the mastermind of psychology. Please bear in mind, and we hope that all the contestants can compete in a healthy manner in their online meeting Zoom app. Try to level up the best you will deliver your full speech in your full confidence. Who will be our next Psych Genius? Only here on the Psych The Game Show Challenge. The mechanics for the competition. First, scripts can be original or adapted from any authentic text, and all the topics should be related only to psychology. And the decisions of the judges is final, and that is the final, and all the winners shall be announced after the game and the presentation of all the contestants. Let us begin with our first contestant, Ms. Cara Joy, as psychology student in her first year studying college now. Let's give her a round of applause. Good luck, Ms. Cara Joy and CJ Bagay, for your declamation contest. Outshine all your confidence and be the new Psych Genius. The overburdened mental health system may be short as many as 15,000 psychiatrists and psychologists as they grow in demand for their services outpaces supplies. According to 2017 report from National Council for Behavioral Health, but some proponents say that by then, an unlikely tool, artificial intelligence, may be ready to help mental health practitioners. Us, psychologists, students, and practitioners in the making mitigate the impact of the disease. Medicine is already a fruitful area for artificial intelligence. It has shown promise in diagnosing disease, interpreting images, and zeroing in on treatment plans, though psychiatry and psychology is in many ways a uniquely human field, requiring emotional intelligence and perception that computer can stimulate. Even here, experts say that artificial intelligence could have an impact. The field, they argue, could benefit from artificial intelligence's ability to analyze data and pick up on patterns and warning signs, so subtle, human might never notice them. Mental health apps and programs already incorporated artificial intelligence like Rebond, an app-based neutrality and chatbot that combines artificial intelligences and principles from cognitive behavioral therapy. But it will probably be some 5 to 10 years before algorithms are routinely used in clinics. And artificial intelligence is only as strong as the data it's trained on and quantified well enough to program an algorithm. It is possible this will happen in the future with more and larger psychological studies. And wearable devices offer further opportunities. Many people already use wearables to track their sleep and physical activity, both of which are closely related to mental well-being. And artificial intelligence may allow us to have more time in our day to spend actually communicating and effectively and being more human rather than being diagnostic machines, and provide some of the empathy that can get swallowed by of the business of what we do. Me, Sarah. That's a wonderful speech, and that's probably will help our future psychologists also to maintain their mentality when it comes to that matter. I would like to call upon our last contestants for the show, and thanks that we've been have our contestants, and this is our final contestants to show us and showcase her talent in speech and delivering her ideas to our judges. Upon here on stage is Miss CJ Bagay, and she is also a psychology student, and she is currently in her second year. Let's give her a round of applause. And general developments in how people do their work, and uncertainty that changes imply may also result in transformation in very important meaning of work. As we already know, the work plays a central role in modern society, because work peoples provide not only with economic security, but also personal identity and psychological health. Work satisfies instrumental needs through income and security, and intrinsic needs by maintaining people's self-esteem and sense of accomplishment through interpersonal relationships and opportunities for developmental. Should be examined whether how the meaning of work changes under the fourth industrial revolution, and what effects these changes have on career commitment and psychological health of the worker. However, some benefits such as low cost, higher quality, improved safety and environmental protection, the reduction of high-risk jobs is considered an important aspect at the time, and fatal accidents at work are still an extremely significant problem. Moreover, people can participate in defining, creating, and maintaining automated systems with this fourth industrial revolution. Nevertheless, from psychological perspective, some issues have emerged. Digital skills is a target that is also supported by the European Digital Single Market Strategy, which sustains digital inclusions and projects that aim to which there is still a gap between people who have access to specific information technology to identify whether their self-esteem is high or low, or people who do not. This gap influences the development of digital skills, as well as opportunities to find a job. Finally, career practitioners also play a crucial role, since they can encourage people to strengthen their ability to deal with changes, to develop their employability skills according to the needs of the labor market, and to versus skills and professional competence in new jobs in those cases where the revolution has led to them losing their job. More investments in services of this kind are needed in order to improve their efficacy and accessibility. Moreover, still fourth industrial revolution supports workers and organizations in order for them to have their self-esteem and mental well-being to be associated in their job. Thank you, Ms. CJ Bagay, and that is the final round of our contestants. And we will showcase our results, and it will depend to our judges. Thank you, Ms. CJ Bagay, and for that speech. That's a wonderful time for industrial revolution, and that will help our future workers and also our future psychology. Sino kaya ang kaabang-abang na next guest? Dito lang yan sa On the Couch. Life was so different.
Mga kapuso, ang bakasyon ng mga estudyante, panahon din para sa ilang batang lalaki at mga binatilyo
Lunes, kung kailan lalarga na ulit sa trabaho ang marami sa ating mga kababayan. Ayon sa MMDA, malapit na
Pasok na sa Lunes, kaya di ba na paghahanda ng mga guro, estudyante at kabuyan.
Before. Resilience, care, faith, humanity. It has been a journey, yet we are still fighting. We saw the ultimate test for human race to overcome. With no boundaries or lanes, how can we move forward if we do not know how to stand? So, this is us. This is us hiding our identity. This is us protecting ourselves. This is us being scared. This is us adjusting.
May kumpirmado ng kaso ng 2019 novel coronavirus o nCoV sa bansa. Ayon sa DOH,
92 na ang kaso ng COVID-19 sa Pilipinas. 600
Sa tuwing papasok ang mga healthcare workers sa tinaguriang hot zone,
Kami anxious kasi first time mag-PPE ng ibang tao ng mga young
walang
doctors,
kasiguraduhan
young
kung
nurses.
makakalabas pa sila ng hindi nakukuha ang sakit na kanilang pinupuksa.
Crisis.
Hindi ka na makahinga?
Ulong sa pagbantay sa mga checkpoints sa
Ulhara na po ang ikalawang doktor ng Philippine Heart Center na pinatay ng
Ilalagay
sakit.
ang abon ng kanyang misis na si Dr. Karen Sinin, isa sa magigiting na
habang mahigit 100 medical staff ang nakakuha.
bagamat nahaharap sa krisis ang ating bansa, hindi pa
kailangan
rin
matalo,
nawawala.
kundi ang ang ating kaligtasan. Ito ang kwento ng mga
quarantine. Sumulat na si PCSO General
May
Manager
mga bagong benepisyo na hatid ng pamahalaan para sa mga
Duterte
healthcare workers.
ang pagbibigay ng panibagong bugso ng active hazard
Para
duty
sa mga
pay
kawani
ng sektor ng
Sakop ito
kalusugan.
ang civilian employees
maparegular.
COVID-19 pandemic. Sa ilalim ng administrative
Sa
order number
Pero
30.
iba ang setup. Ayon sa Department of Trade and Industry,
ilang mga
pwede
lumalaban.
mag-
Kapag ito sa
quarantine
ABS,
workers. Pero iba ang setup. Ayon sa Department of Trade and Industry, pwede mag-set up na self-service ang mukha.
COVID-19 frontliner. Sila ang mga tinaguriang mga bagong bayani. Ang ating mga frontliners, kayo ay tangi. Kayong lahat ay natatanging mga bayani. We salute you, our frontliners. Kaabang-abang sa ating primetime show, ang On the Couch. Guess? Who's guest? Soon on the Couch.
Please give a warm welcome to our Golden Tide award winner Miss Cara Joy.
I can't believe I have to come on a talk show this year, and
I know, and I thought I'd see you before the show started. And it did happen.
I haven't seen you.
And thank God I have a talk show, or we would never see each other again.
Exactly.
Why? So, look you with your media. I know. And that's how long
It's been this long
since you've seen me. Like, I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's been so long. You invited me. It's been so long. I think that's about 6 months. That's about. I'm very relaxed now. I feel like a lot more comfortable because, everybody makes me feel comfortable. I mean, you seem very relaxed right now. Really, Miss Cara. So, a lot of our netizens and audiences, there are a lot of questions since the pandemic started, but one of their questions here, there is one of their questions, is like, how are they going to improve their mental health and while saving their money? It's because that there's a well-checked system increasingly that recognizes that even psychologists, that they are the expertise in the services, improves care and saves money. It's that there's a trend that has power to significantly improve patient care. Yeah, health systems are becoming more proactive right now, right? And identifying patients' behavioral health needs earlier on, and our netizens and audiences wants to investigate those strategies. I hope you get it, and that's ranging for providing apps and telemedicines to promoting more routine screening during this pandemic. A lot of us want to save money while developing their mental health. In a trend that has the power to significantly improve some of our mental health issues, and health systems are becoming more proactive about identifying patients' behavioral health needs earlier on, investigating in strategies. Some of this, like what you said, is providing apps and medicines to promoting more routine screening during some of their mental health issues, while this kind of matter of saving money. One of the best efforts, some said, that treat emerging behavioral health issues before they reach the level of clinical diagnosis, right? Because providers are recognizing the significant benefit, obviously on behalf of the patients, but also from an operation and financial perspective of addressing behavioral health issues and really treating the whole person. Mental health crisis is emergency nutrition, right? This kind of interesting one for our audiences, right? Some of most common concerns including anxiety, depression, and attention deficit disorders, and many of that in this pandemic. All of us have been through so tough times, and when adults or children are believed to be definitely different kinds of disorders and some mental health issues, psychologists are one of our providers additionally. So, Ms. Cara, there's another question here. Our second question is, how are raising voices of humanity can prevent gun violence? Because a lot of people in some countries that they claim that lives of some Americans or some other entities that through homicide, suicide, and mass shootings and accidents that those numbers are rising. So how this psychology is taking into place, like this kind of comprehensive public health, is kind of really psychological based because raising our voice on gun violence, psychology is taking a comprehensive public health approach to addressing this kind of crisis because each year, firearms claims that lives of some 4,000 Americans through homicide, suicides, mass shooting, and accidents. Those numbers are rising, and some of them are claiming that deadliest mass shootings have occurred over the past 10 years. And even in this time of pandemic, it is happening. And through this range of efforts in the community, in the media, and in research, psychologists have escalated their work on gun violence prevention and what because gun violence should be treated as public health problem like other public health epidemics, for example, tobacco use and car accidents. Gun violence is best addressed through public health interventions. That's because this approach is apolitical, based on science and data, and designed to foster population-level health and tailor to specific subpopulations to our people. And some of evidence is based on public health approach will allow us to specify what is likely to work under what circumstances with what population is submerged. So mental health illness alone does not predict gun violence. And some of the studies that for only a small percentage of gun violence and that people with serious mental illness are much more likely to be victims than perpetrators of such attacks. Right? Because that's one of the questions of what truth, whether it has mental illness or whether some of our audiences like has been asking that how can it be done about pedophilia usually defined, like what are some issues about pedophilia, because those past years some of our audiences and netizens, some of them are concerned about this kind of evidence that sexual orientations means different things in different contexts. When they say sexual orientation, most people mean a sexual interest that is inborn and unchangeable. No one chooses to be sexually attracted to children, although people do choose whether they act on sexual attractions. And therapists have been attempting to turn pedophiles into non-pedophiles for a very long time, but no one has presented any objective evidence of any enduring change in sexual interest. People can learn self-control. People can take sex drive, reducing medications, and people can learn how to live more productive lives. But we do not appear to be able to change the pedophilia is a sexual preference for a strong sexual interest in children. The term usually refers only to sexual preference for interest or early pubescent children, because it is extremely important not to confuse pedophilia, meaning the sexual interest in children, with actual child molestation. It's different. Not every person who experiences sexual attractions to children acts on those attractions, because people who are pedophilic but who work to remain celibate their entire lives are being increasingly recognized as needing and deserving all the support society can give. So there's this thing that many jurisdictions have passed mandatory reporting regulations for psychologists and other healthcare providers that consequently When someone who thinks he might be a pedophile comes in for counseling or therapy, the psychologist may be compelled by law to report the person to the authority, and that, of course, can lead to loss of the person's job, family, and everything else. So these people have simply stopped coming in at all, so they don't go to psychologists because they are afraid. So these people have simply stopped seeking help, and instead of getting help to them, those psychologists, psychiatrists, or those mental health specialists and practitioners, we now have pedophiles circulating in societies receiving no support at all. Our current evidence suggests that pedophilia results from a difficult writing in the country, and although learning happens after birth, humans are pre-wired to recognize and respond to certain stimuli. So it seems from research conducted thus far that stimuli that usually elicits nurturing and protective responses in most adults are instead eliciting sexual responses in pedophiles. And it is reasonable for question of social acceptability to be directed at behaviors. People are responsible for their behaviors, not their thoughts or sexual attractions. For example, we are very readily acknowledged in a typical heterosexual man will, while just walking down the street, find someone with sexually attractive. We would not, however, conclude it is socially acceptable for him to coerce any of those women into sex. Thinking of pedophilia as an intimate characteristic of a person cannot change go a very long way in helping society come to a rational response to the problem, and one that can help prevent molestation. Are most likely to commit their offenses when they feel that they have nothing going for them in their lives, and that therefore they have nothing to lose. People are most likely to do some most desperate things when they feel most desperate, right? Unfortunately, much of the current social system greatly increase rather than decrease these people's feeling of desperation. And one of traditional health or solution for this kind of matter or issue is that pedophiles have largely been based on treatments initially designed for addiction, using kind of relapse prevention. This has been very difficult to assess the effectiveness of the model because we cannot randomize people into treatment and placebo groups. So one of my greatest hope is that about the last treatment, because more about prevention. It is much more better if we have much more prevention, right? And despite the fact that many people imagine sex offenders to be insatiable predators or ticking time bombs, only 10 to 15% of sex offenders commit new offenses. I believe we can prevent a much greater number of victims if we put greater energy into early detection and provide support before the first offender occurs, rather than relying only on stronger and stronger punishment after the fact and the act. We thank you, Ms. Cara Joy, that you appreciated that I invited you in this document with a lot of same issues about psychological health and some of our issues regarding health matters, and especially our mental well-being, and them are being addressed. Even I think we have afternoon, Philippines. Good afternoon, Manila. It's a sunny day, May 19, 2021. This is Cara Joy Seguin, serving you the hottest and the most leading news of the hour. Your news, our business. For the headlines.
How did psychologists assess common conditions related to problem behavior? American Psychological Association regarding the jury's finding that Derek Chauvin is guilty of murdering George Floyd. How psychologists assess the urgent need to dismantle racism. Did mental health professionals address and prevent racism and discrimination among countries? In this time of pandemic, how can parents connect with their children and adolescents via telehealth during COVID-19?
Current issues and new directions in psychology and health. What happened to the behavior in the decade? This is Megan for the details. Current issues and new directions in psychology and health. What happened to the behavior in the decade? The importance of behavioral for health and healthcare has clearly been established and even recognized to have importance at the government level. It has been argued that 48% of deaths in the USA and other countries are attributed to behavior and to all consequences, behavioral risk factors being smoking, physical activity, dietary behaviors, and alcohol intake. Additionally, behavior is involved in translation of biomedical findings into applications. Biomedical science and health services research identify evidence-based practice, but implementation is slow because of the behavior of those planning and delivering health services. Clinical studies demonstrate treatment where interventions are delivered, and the outcomes are frequently evaluated in terms of patient activity limitations and restrictions in participation of World Health Organization.
According to mental health professionals, there is clearly a need for the application of a science of behavior in the domain of health and anticipated opportunities for developmental of the science. In the collaboration with the American Psychological Association, they recognize this is a scientific field with capacity for immediate progress in labeling as the decade of behavior, for health psychology to be recognized as having a contribution to make in understanding and changing behavior for improved health and healthcare. According to them, that they need to label behavior, to use the existing theories of behavior to explain behavior and to guide behavior change, and to invest in cumulative rather than proliferative science. In developing the application of our science, the only behavior we can change is our own.
This is Megan reporting, your news, our business. The American Psychological Association believes the jury reached the correct decision. It is to write that Derek Chauvin is being held accountable, as should every person and the system in the nation that suggests or reinforces racism. Justice will never be achieved until we dismantle unjust system. While many people feel relief at this verdict, it's telling that we live in a nation where a verdict like this would ever be in question. This case's conclusion does not eliminate the deeply rooted inequities that exist in our country and the racism and unconscious bias that permeate our structures and systems.
According to psychologists, Black people experience collective and vicarious trauma that escalates with every murder of an unarmed Black person at the hands of police. These unconscionable acts take away an important sense of safety and normalcy and have long-lasting effects on mental and physical health. Injustice affects everyone, That is, they need to address systemic and structural factors such as policies in law enforcement and criminal justice. According to them, that they need to stand against all forms of hatred and violence. We must recognize that seeking justice does not always lead to the system changes, that people of color need to feel protected and safe. According to them, we must acknowledge and lift up voices of those who are hurting and living with deep emotional wounds.
According to psychologists, they understand anger is a reasonable reaction to unreasonable situation. They also understand that anger distresses and numbs them. They take hope that many will channel their anguish and use the energy to work for long-term change. The guilt verdict will not bring back George Floyd or erase the systemic and interpersonal racism that contributed to his death, or change the fact that he was as nation have much work to do. But it leaves us hope that this can be a turning point for everyone in the country. Psychology has opportunity to continue evolving and meet the needs of changing population, starting by countering the pervasive and damaging effects of racism. Experts contended that anti-racist psychological science is better science because it adapts to the reality of increasing diversity in other countries. In short, psychology has two choices. First is to advance or become irrelevant.
Pursuing anti-racism in psychology requires a critical examination of how discipline structures opportunity in ways that upholds white supremacy.
Psychology understanding and responsibility better understand the aspects of racism are vast. The experts on human behavior, psychologists have long studied racism's devastating effect, with much of the research leading to positive changes. They know those structures exist and they function in a way that highlights those structures, but they use it in a language way that shows structural racism is happening, rather than simply stating that blacks have high blood pressure on average than whites. Psychologists, researchers encourages to describe the experiences and environmental stressors that might contribute to higher blood pressure for blacks. They also recommends that the institution that supports them in a benchmark and enforces accountability for the use system-centered language. This is Megan reporting, your news, our business. Don't change your dial, we'll be right back with more news after these reminders. And now we're back. You're still listening to CJBS 847 DX Votes. Reframing how we think about racism and discrimination can open our eyes open to new solutions. For this one begin when taking on the issue of racism. The intersecting individual, environmental, and structural factors that contribute to racism and discrimination can make it feel overwhelming to determine which pieces of the issues that can affect the people and the society. Our socialization and our training can make challenging to navigate, with many who wants to make difference at a loss for where to stop. There is action that we can take immediately to help abolish racism and discrimination, to contribute to equity and inclusion in our own communities, and that is to challenge our thinking. Reframing how we think about racism and discrimination can promote greater understanding in ourselves and others, and open our eyes to new solutions.
Many view racism as an interpersonal problem, while much work is needed to eliminate hate and discrimination among individuals and in communities. We cannot ignore the structural and institutional factors that arise from racism, which may have much greater impact on people's lives. By refocusing some of our research, practice, and training on the systemic and organizational issues, we can introduce more effective solutions that address the complexity of racism in all its manifestations.
Psychology has much to offer society in helping to address racial justice issues. However, it requires our own willingness to approach the issues differently and to challenge long-held biases within the field. If we do that, psychology can have the impact that we are seeking. Doing telehealth with children is different from adults. A newly published resource summarizes advice on telehealth with children. When planning the setup of the both psychologist and child telehealth space, consider the child might prefer less formality and might be distracted by icons in the environment and would not be distracted for the adults. Younger children might need more space to engage in therapy activities such as drawing and playing. The psychologist should explain telehealth to the child in developmentally appropriate manner, offering plenty of opportunities to ask questions. Consider building rapport with children by sharing items from home or drawing on camera. Also, to keep the child, especially a young child, engaged in telehealth session, considering switching activities or using interactive online features. Providing extra support to parents and caregivers that are being confronted with job and income insecurities or loss, balancing parenting children at home while working, striving to obtain potential scarce resources such as food and supplies for their family, and parenting with increased isolation during a time of physical distancing. These stressors in turn can take toll on the parent's own well-being and mental health. That's why psychologists should check in with parents of your child and adolescent parents and strive to provide them with extra support. They encourage parents to seek their own mental health care as needed. By paying attention to vulnerable children and families, while parents might be inundated with general information for children during COVID-19, there are fewer resources available for children with special needs, such as children with disabilities, medical needs, language barriers, low income, and more. Considering the adaptations to treatment might be helpful for each child and their family. A child without internet access might be able to continue therapy by phone. A child with autism spectrum disorder may need extra time to adjust to telehealth rather than in-person sessions and might benefit from recreating the routines of in-person therapy as closely as possible, according to mental health professionals. According to psychologists, they should consider practical adaptation they can develop with the patient's family to enhance their new at-home routines. A child with disability might typically receive therapies and support at school that they are not able to receive at home without special equipment and while physical distancing, considering there are new routines that can be tried at home to strive to achieve at least some of benefits of these services. And the number of diagnosed with and treated for disruptive disorders including attention deficits and hyperactivity disorder or ADHD has markedly increased over the last decade. Concurrent with this trend is growing debate about best way to treat such problems. While in all children. children develop at their own pace, there are developmentally appropriate stages through which children progresses. It's important for parents, caregivers, and teachers to be aware of their children's growth and development and to watch for unusual behavioral changes or regression. As a general rule, it is time to consult a mental health provider if your child's behavior is age inappropriate on age pattern and if it is interfering with his or her learning, growth, and social development. News with no bias, news with no exceptions, delivering nothing but the truth. This is CJBS 847 in your news channel. Your news, our business. For the recaps of today's hottest news,
emotions and our moods. Everybody knows how to look after physical health, but looking after our mental health is just as important because you can't see it, you need
Tonight, a country emerging from protests of pain. After the killing of George Floyd,
I cannot breathe.
Viral moments of racial
home, and that's when the woman started firing racist remarks.
Resilient, many are struggling to adjust to the changes.
This is only natural. The routines that once gave him a sense.
This has been Cara Joy Seguin, and see you again next time for another hottest news in the country. News with no bias. News with no exception. 847, your news, our business. God bless and keep safe. Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
Our lives changed. The world changed in a snap of time. In times of fears and uncertainty, how should we go? What if we are driven with angst and anxiety? Should we believe that mental health care can wait? Does our mental health just a hoax? Collective hysteria? Or conspiracy? Or should we subsist? A bewildering array of challenges.
Visits were up 24% for 5 to 11-year-olds. And
we found is that consistently around 1 in 5 people in our study have been experiencing depression symptoms that are, significant enough that
day and night, 24 hours. So,
but starting their careers and building momentum in their careers may have experienced it.
And various levels of lockdown have taken a toll on many people's health. A new study from the American Psychological Association out this week found 82% of adults never imagined.
You know that feeling where your thoughts scare you or make life tough? Sometimes it feels like no one else in the world has those thoughts or feelings. No one seems to know how difficult it is to deal with your feelings. And it's not easy to share your deepest secrets. You might think something is wrong with you. Or you might worry what other people think. And all of that makes your thoughts and feelings worse. Our culture has created this environment of shame. Until the 1960s, society sent people away if they had challenges managing their thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Over time, we learned that we didn't have to be afraid. We learned how to help people get better. We became hopeful. But there are remnants of those images in our culture today. Which is why some people still feel uncomfortable talking about it. The stigma has taken new forms too. With more access to more people all the time, it can seem like the world is telling us it's not okay to be anything but perfect. The truth is, everyone has thoughts or feelings that can be hard to deal with. So why do we make it so difficult on ourselves by judging others who could be going through the same challenges we are? What if, instead of seeing labels, we saw people who are struggling and could be there for them so they didn't feel so alone? What if we looked past our fear of mental health and started to talk about it in a constructive way? What if, as a society, we used empowering words and healthy images to help people feel supported? Maybe then more of us could feel comfortable telling others when we're having a hard time. Maybe more people would get the help they need. And maybe one day we won't have to talk separately about mental health and physical health, but just health. The truth is, each of us has the power to change our culture. Will you join us? Share this video with a kid, your neighbor, a friend, and help us break the stigma of mental health.
COVID-19 public health crisis has led to a spike in known risk factors for mental health conditions, including everything from social isolation to unemployment to overall feelings of insecurity and stability. In light of these risk factors, as well as potential long-term mental health impacts, we are looking for short-term and ongoing responses. COVID-19 face post-traumatic symptoms, psychological instability, depression, anxiety, and the possibility of SARS-CoV-2 is neurotropic, which emphasizes that the need for evaluation of potential short-term and long-term effects on the nervous system for our mental health.
Good morning. Dr. Evans, I'd like to start with this study on stress in America from the APA. Who is struggling the most and why?
Well, what the survey found is that many Americans are struggling, but the groups that are having the most difficulty, as we might imagine, essential workers, parents of small children, particularly children who are being schooled at home through remote learning, people of color, and Gen Z. That is that young group of young adults up to about the age of 23.
And Dr. Kelly,
the angst and anxiety generated by the pandemic, thousands of people have flooded the health system, while others have rushed to supermarkets in an attempt to forestall coming supplies shortage. Mathematically, modeling will help us understand the natural history of disease, predict outbreak patterns, and identify strategies to modify the course of pandemic. Nevertheless, simple measures such as behavioral interventions are among most critical mechanisms to reducing impact of this pandemic. Are you feeling a mixed emotions during coronavirus? Stress during an infectious disease outbreak can include the fear and worrying about our own health and health of our loved ones, changes in sleep and eating patterns, difficulty sleeping or concentrating, worsening of chronic health problems, mental health conditions, and increased use of alcohol, tobacco. Healthcare must be comprehensive and target the population as a whole when it comes to changing behaviors, beliefs, and attitudes. Special management and interventions should focus on patients with psychiatric illnesses. Issues such as stigma and its segregationist consequences must be addressed, and the mental health of physicians and other frontline healthcare workers must be priority. The mental health agenda remains urgent and essential, and should be one of the cornerstones of resilience in a society that will face a bewildering array of challenges as a result of this global pandemic. The early stages of pandemic and the ensuing lockdowns were hard on all of us in different ways. Isolation, joblessness, childcare, and many other challenges severely affected the mental well-being of many people around the world. Yet here we are, a year on. How we are coping.
I have retreated into myself over the past years and found myself reaching out less and less to friends as I've come used to living life alone. As a single person who lives alone and did not have access to a support bubble, I have become increasingly isolated.
And since my family lives in a different country, the fact that I was unable to see them in person for an entire year, I've become increasingly isolated.
I was unable to support them effectively through times of illness and grief, and have really left a mark and made this pandemic more difficult for me to cope with. The fact that I work from home means I end up working longer hours. Work itself has become more stressful and intense, which makes me teeter and edge of burnout almost constantly.
My deepening sense of isolation has contributed to feelings of helplessness and anxiety.
The Cara Seguin Specials, The Striving Mental Health Amidst Pandemic. Patuloy tumutok sa Psychologist, the Cara Seguin Special Documentaries. Abangers ang lahat sa ating everyday prime time. Patuloy tumutok sa ating mga new TV shows dito lang sa CJBS TV.